Thanks for joining us inside the Dancer's Studio, where we bring listeners like you closer to the creative process. Inside the Dancer's Studio is a program of the National Center for Choreography at the University of Akron as part of our Ideas in Motion initiative. This episode was recorded in the presence of a live audience in 2023. Today, we join Christy Bolingbroke, our Executive Artistic Director, in conversation with two members of the St. Paul, Minnesota-based company BRKFST Dance Company. Lisa, MonaLisa Berman, is the founder and artistic director of BRKFST and is the recipient of the 2019 Artist Initiative Grant and the 2016 McKnight Dancer Fellowship. Joseph Minnesota Joe Tran is a founding member of BRKFST and a member of Knuckleheads Cali breaking crew. BRKFST's egalitarian and virtuosic choreographic collaboration is deeply rooted in the hip-hop adage, each one, teach one. Regardless of class, race, experience, age, or gender, everyone remains both teacher and student. The lived experiences of this collective, who identify as working class, queer, femme, and BIPOC, inform their compositions.
We're here to understand more about your creative journey. And so, B-boy, breaking, B-girl, when did you actually start to sort of own or lean into the title choreographer?
Do you understand?
That's a great question. So as a B-boy or a breaker or B-girl, as you come up in the scene, in the breaking scene, you are meant to be an individual. The whole idea is to create your own moves, create your own style. So in essence, I didn't know the term choreographer when I was a kid at 13 starting, but you choreograph your own stuff.
Yeah.
Like from the beginning. And so having stepped into the theater world in 2014 was the first time I did a theater stage show. I had realized I have been choreographing like this whole time since the beginning. Yeah. And then it was from that moment on the theater stage that I started really considering the term is my first thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your experience?
I feel like similarly, I started breaking later in life. I didn't start till I was in college or outside of college, actually. And so before I started with BRKFST, I was dancing with another company, another hip hop company in Minnesota. And it was just average practice that it was like, come with moves, come with movement. And we never really considered ourselves, we're the choreographer, I'm the choreographer. But then moving into BRKFST, again, we were like, yeah, I guess we are the choreographers. And it was interesting because contributing movement, like each person in BRKFST comes with their own individual style. And so they're also coming with all their own moves and all their own combos. And like, it's kind of like built-in phrase work that you then start morphing with the other people. But yeah, it was interesting because it makes me think when I applied for the McKnight Fellowship, they have the fellowship for dancer and for choreographer. And it was an interesting moment for me because I was like, well, I am a dancer, but I've also choreographed all my own stuff because there was no opportunities for us to be in other works. There was no like company for us to audition to or like nobody wanted us. I mean, nobody wanted breakers back then. It was like,
That's hard to believe.
No, it's like, in terms of the stage work, it felt like in terms of stage work in Minnesota, it felt like there was really no opportunities unless you make your own. And so it was just making our own stuff from the beginning.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I guess I really started to consider it also when I like applied for the McKnight, and I was like, I guess I'm both, but I'm going to go with dancer because I, in my head, consider being a choreographer that you're like doing it for other people. I don't know why. But
They had actually suggested that you maybe apply for the choreography.
yeah,
I think.
it was interesting because they were like, well, I feel like you're too advanced in terms of choreography to just apply for dancer, but also that's confusing. And yeah, so it's
But not just in breaking, I think what is becoming more and more normalized as we move away from codified techniques in the 20th century, like a Graham technique or a Cunningham technique, is that dancers are expected to contribute in the room.
Sure.
And even choreographic credit has been changing. If you look at the playbill, and it may list a lead choreographer in collaboration with the dancers. So from a creative standpoint, then, where do you start when you are facing the blank page, when you are walking into the studio and saying, like, all right, I want to make a dance?
That's a good one.
I think, well, at least the last number of shows that we've made as a company, we start by just having a number of rehearsals where we just talk about what we're interested in or what's affecting us in life, what's inspired us, and just kind of sharing stories, watching film clips, listening to different types of music, and kind of just like then moving towards what we all feel like would be an interesting exploration for a production. That's how I feel like.
Yeah. For me, I'm always practicing all the time. And so it usually starts with moves or aesthetic, something like I'm currently obsessed with that I want to share with the group, that I'm exploring, researching. And then I try to
Physically in the body,
physically in the
researching.
body. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I try to find like an excuse to use it. You know, like all these little ideas that I've never used in a battle or something like that. It's like, oh, here's an opportunity that it could serve perhaps our theater work. So for me, it starts in the body most of the time. But yeah, just like what Lisa said, we just are like, what haven't we done yet?
Yeah.
Let's start there.
And how would you describe your creative or choreographic response to music? Because, sometimes people are like, I love this song. I need to make a dance to this song. There's sort of a myth that there's a song like deeply embedded or there's a dance deeply embedded in music and the choreographer just has to unlock it, which we know is not true. So I'm curious also, spoiler alert, because I know you've been collaborating with symphonies and orchestras. I don't think people expect that from breaking. So what do you look for in music, or how do you consider it in your creative process?
Well, one of our founding members and core members, Renee Copeland, is also a composer and a musician. And so from the very first show we did, the first evening length production, she made our track. So she's been making our tracks in collaboration with sometimes other musicians, but she puts it all together. And so for us, we're like kind of spoiled in that we'll be in rehearsal and we've talked about a theme or like a vibe or something that she kind of just creates with music. And then we'll listen to it and be like, nah, not exactly what we were thinking. And then she'll tweak it and come back with something else. And then we kind of go back and forth with that until we settle on like what the vibe of the music is. And then she'll tweak it in rehearsal with us to fit our movement. So that was what we were used to. And then going into working with orchestras was a totally different world for us.
Yeah, we don't normally create to pre-existing music. So we had to really dig deep to find the meaning of what we thought the song was about. And so, for example, Beethoven's Grosse Fugue, which is a beautiful track, but I don't listen to classical music. None of us really do. The first time we heard it, we were like, how do we even dissect this thing?
We were like, what? It all sounds the same.
A monster of a composition. And so what we did was go back into what we do as breakfast is just try to find meaning and like things we're interested in. And then so we found out that like it was Beethoven's basically last composition he made at the height of his deafness. And then we also researched what a fugue meant.
And also like how people looked at Beethoven at that time.
Right.
Which is that they were like, this music is trash. Like, not this music is trash, but they were like, they did not like it.
It was too contemporary.
Yeah.
And so we were like, oh, that feels like us.
Yes.
We like to do things that maybe people don't understand. And then we found out that fugue, I'm paraphrasing, in psychology means it's like some dissociative disorder or episode you have. And so we were like, let's lean into that and like really make the piece like frantic
Disjointed.
and weird and like
Yeah.
you jump from state to state. And so we always go back into like concept world for us. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now we're like, we can hear any second of that song, and I'm like, I know where that is in the music.
Yeah.
But I would just kind of add like we like to have music serves as a mood, like user experience. Like we like to use dissonance a lot. You know, the terminology we used in the workshop the other day. Like, how do we contrast the mood? So not always doing everything to the beat, but to heighten what we want to say.
Yeah.
It's another form of contribution or, and a complementary way of working. And I also appreciate that you don't just focus on the technique of the music, but that you start looking at like, oh, let me break this down. Where does fugue fit in other areas of study, like psychology, all of that's 360 degrees. How is the relationship to music the same or different when you're in a battle versus what you describe as the theater world?
I mean, in a battle, you should be on the music all the time. You should be hitting the beats. You should be dancing as accurately to the music as possible. In theater, you can create contrast and themes by not following the music. So if it's like going crazy, and you're just like, that is the thing.
Super slow. Just translating that for audio is the intensity and minute movement that you just offered. To compared to crazy music, and you can't do that in battling.
I don't think it would read the same. I would venture, why not? Like, maybe I'll try that one day. But in general, the culture has been just on the music.
And it's also interesting, like, to side note, as we're talking about battles, another thing that I know both of us really loved about going into the theater world versus battling is like, you get to repeat. You're not supposed to really repeat in battles.
Wow.
It's not.
From battle to battle, like if I won a battle and I went into the next round, I should not run the same moves at all.
Yeah.
That would be like, you ran out of material.
Yeah.
Like, why are you running moves?
Yeah.
That, I think, speaks a lot to how you talked about you're always physically researching something. No wonder you're like, oh, I can't just do this one move over and over again. I have to find new ways because you're expanding your skill set. You're expanding what's available to you.
And I don't know if I speak for you, but I feel like I just in general get bored with my own stuff. And so I'm like, I need new stuff. I always need new stuff. So it's like you're always back at the back at practicing, trying to make something new, make a new move, take something that you did and make it different so that you're surprising yourself constantly.
And I mean, we're veering a little bit from the question, I suppose, but we use repetition a lot in our work, though.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, I can use this move twice, or like throughout the whole show.
Right.
So they can,
It's like a motif.
it's a motif, so they see it.
Yeah.
It keeps reappearing, and so then the audience can be like, well, why is that? Why do I keep seeing that? And
that's also training the viewer. I mean, maybe also music is not my background, but when you can sort of follow as a listener and you're like hearing that, and then the third time it comes around, oh, it's a little bit different, that adds some of the creative elements. And speaking solely as a viewer for myself, sometimes what you do can be so fast or complicated. I need to see it more than once to truly appreciate it. So thank you for those repetition moments. That feels like we're in on something together, audience and performer. A more sort of practical question, but some of these were sourced from our students too. How do you name a dance? You're working on something evening length, and now you have to, like, naming a child, like, you're like, what are you going to be until the end of time? How do you, and especially sometimes we know, like, you have to share the name of a dance before the dance is done.
Totally.
So, yeah, how do you title something?
That usually for us, it's been in the middle of the work. We like to grab inspiration from multiple places, which is how most people operate anyway. And then once we find a through line, then it kind of appears.
Yeah. It's also about, like, once we know the through line and we're like, okay, we have to title it. It's like, what captures this, but also keeps it mysterious. I feel like that's the kind of titles we've been.
That's a dance. Yeah.
We generally like titles also that are short enough that you can just be like, boom, that one. I want a longer title, but, like, for example, I wanted a show called Are You In or Are You Out? Mm-hmm. But then we shortened it to 60/40, which is like another translation of that. Like, you're
over.
kind of in most of it, but you're out of it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's an uneven split. And so our text threads for titles are, like, ridiculous to each other. We eventually arrive on one.
Yeah. And also, like, making sure that it's kind of, I don't know, rolls off the tongue. Like, we've been, sometimes we think of titles that then you say a couple times and it's like, it doesn't sound the way you want. Or
I will say in two things, that coming up with a title before isn't necessarily a bad thing if it drives you to go there. Yeah. But then, borrowing your phrase of Akron that I saw in the office, speaking in draft, you don't have to commit to the title. You have to be like, you know what, actually, this feels better. And then also, if you're creating a title in the middle of creating work, that can drive it home as well. Like, everybody's on the same page. Does it serve 60/40? What is 60/40 about this phrase work or moment? Or what is, this section can be 100, and then this other section can demonstrate 0. So it's not, you know what I mean? Like, you can interpret it several different ways.
I also feel like the title, coming up with it mid-show for us, has helped us with costuming, and has helped us, like, solidify, like, what do we want our costumes to look like and how does that reflect the piece? Because having the title kind of, like, encompasses what the piece is about, and then it's kind of like, how do the costuming reflect that?
Yeah, that processing how y'all are sharing this, so much of it sounds exactly how you also work with other dancers. It's contributing. And then, so it's like, okay, you're always collecting, you're always listening, and then making decisions in response, like improvising.
Yeah.
And I really like this idea of the title is not the cherry on top at the end of making something. It's also not the sort of, like, basic beginning, once upon a time, and then you go through the rest of it. But it's also in dialogue. It's something you can play with throughout the process. Speaking of the process, though, whether we're making a dance, composing, a new piece of music, writing a paper, what do you do when you kind of hit a wall? You're stuck, maybe creatively. And how do you get unstuck?
I can start.
Yeah, go ahead. Because I'm stuck right now.
I think movement-wise, we were talking about this, but movement-wise, actually, who said this to me was James.
Tell us more. Who's James?
He was in one of his crews.
Yeah, he's a b-boy originally from Kansas City, transplanted to Minnesota. He was in my crew years ago. Different crew, but he's dope. Really inspirational.
We're going to have a different conversation about what's different between a crew and a company. But okay, so what did James say?
Yeah, like a long time ago, I was at practice, and just to explain practice is just when it's different than rehearsal, I guess. Practice is just, you just go there and you work on your own stuff. It's just, you go there with different breakers from the community, and people just go there and practice whatever they want to practice. So we were at practice, and he was, and I just didn't know what to work on. And I was like, I should just leave. And he was like, no, when you don't know what to work on, you just practice the basics and something will just happen. And it does. And so every time I feel stuck, I just like drill moves that I know, and then something will fall out of it. And eventually you kind of like get in a zone that then you can switch into creative mode. But like, it's really hard to force yourself to be creative when you're not in the mood, but you have to, it's like going to work. You have to just start. And so if you don't know what to work on or you don't know what to make, to me, it's just like, let me just drill some basics.
Yeah.
And then go from there.
That's great advice. Thank you, James.
Yeah, that's James.
I'm also curious. I mean, breaking is still relatively young, but it's been around enough. And if you're trying to not repeat yourself in battles, how do you sort of strike a balance between new vocabulary and old vocabulary? And I'll even personalize this question specific to breaking, because we've seen this in other dance forms when it's just trick, trick, trick. And now we do splits, and now we do fouette turns, and now we're spinning on our head. That in itself, I would imagine is something that you physically as well as maybe choreographically don't want to do just over and over again. You're looking for that flow and sort of an ebb. So how do you navigate through that?
I would say this. I have several answers, so I'm gonna go that way.
Yeah, let's draft them all.
I'm gonna draft them all. So in terms of like the tricks and seeing explosive movement, because breaking is very explosive. It's crazy. It's like the craziest thing I see every day, all the time. I can't believe it.
And now it's an Olympic sport.
And it's an Olympic sport, which is crazy. But what we like to do is hide the transitions, make it make sense.
Yeah.
One of the best advices that I've been given by Rudy Goblin, who's Miami-based b-boy, but also choreographer and playwright, and he choreographed my McKnight solo film, is that you need to make it make sense. It should be pragmatic. It should come from, you should hide the transition, is what he told me. It should be of the world, not just to throw it in there because, look, I can do this. But if I'm slumped over, like I need to find a way to get to that spin. So that was one of the best advices that I've gotten in terms of choreography and dance.
Yeah.
Is to hide the transition. But I forgot your first part of the question.
Just navigating between those tricks and what is new versus old vocabulary, picking and choosing.
I could add something.
Yeah.
I feel like also as an older breaker now at this point, like there's a lot of the power moves that I physically like can't do anymore because I hurt my back. And every time I do them, it re-injures it.
Yep.
So I'm like, okay, I have to find different like ways to like be explosive with the movement that my body can do at this point in time. And in reality, like footwork, which we taught in class, footwork can be extremely explosive. It's just the way you do it. It's how you put things together. It's the transitions. And so for me, it's been that journey of like, okay, maybe I can't throw those power moves in, even if there's a seamless transition. So how else can you grab the eye in that same way, but, with movement that isn't deemed as like trickstery.
Right. And I do think the vocabulary part is that the foundation is there in any dance form to be an anchor. So when you create from foundation, you understand where the trick is coming from. And so you can set it up for the audience as well, going basic, seeing the basic a couple of times, and then you do the creative thing. So we always have to honor the basics and the foundation of the dance. Always. We always have to get better at it, learn new steps, because it's like infinite. The way the foundation is set up is like people have their own every region has like their own kind of like 6-step, you know what I mean, as an example. And so I think it's important to me that we don't get like creative all the time, but we have to like do it from a place of foundation, if that makes sense.
It does. And you're talking about understanding the foundation and both for your body, for yourselves, as well as for the audience. It reminds me of another one of our visiting artists, Raphael Xavier, who definitely emphasizes progression as a choreographic tool, as well as a tool of training. And he also, comes from a breakdancing background and has explored the theater world differently.
Oh, yeah, Raph is the man.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
And he knows about aging and breaking.
Yes.
So
yes,
like,
absolutely.
It's like hard, man.
They'll be here next week, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Tune in. All right. A teaser. But I'm picking up so much new language as well, because I think sometimes in dance we talk about virtuosity, who's the most flexible, who can jump the highest. I think we should maybe start trying on power moves as a more global term in dance making. I just wanted to appreciate that for sure. And speaking of vocabulary, so this series is described as 21st century dance practices. And it really came from a place that being adjacent to a university environment, and a lot of university dance programs in this country, were built out in the mid 20th century by a lot of white women before women could even have their own credit cards, and had a lot of equal rights and protections, not just for women, but across society. And so we've perpetuated some Eurocentric thinking, and a lot of our conservancy thinking is in that binary. It's ballet or modern. And so we were like, yes, that's a big part of a lot of our foundational training where we've started, and how do we build from there? How do we grow? So we could just name the time that we're in. We are now in the 21st century, but I'm curious, since you accepted this invitation and have been with us this week, operating in our academic environment, how would you describe 21st century dance practices?
I would say that 21st century dance practices is, for the lack of a better term, at the forefront of bringing in dance that is either self-taught or not traditional in the studio, bringing that and giving that a platform.
Yeah.
Because as a breaker, I would have never thought this was a thing. Like, I just go to the club, show up at the battle, try to win, and then go home. Like, that's it. And teach a couple classes here and there. But like, this is giving a platform for dance that usually traditionally have not gotten it.
And also giving that to the next generation to be like, here's another avenue.
This is legit. It's another lane that can get you there.
Yeah.
That can get you here. And so I think breaking is very contemporary. I would argue that it's the most contemporary dance, because every day people are inventing new moves. And then after a few years, those moves are now the foundation again. And so it's like infinite.
And maybe even faster now with things like TikTok.
Yeah.
It's insane.
It's super
It is
insane.
almost annoying to me. I'm like,
Okay. Where's the time to practice if it's just accelerating that quickly?
right. Which is side nugget of some.
Oh, we could
something
go
else.
off on
I
that.
know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Follow up.
Yeah.
Well, then I would ask a final question, and I'd love to hear from both of you, because we do have a lot of dancers with us, and they're going to be navigating their ways out into this world. So as far as becoming a professional dancer and choreographer, navigating a creative career, would you mind sharing some of the best advice that you've received for that sort of longevity beyond just the latest project, but how do you keep going? Because I think those are important tools too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had some advice from a friend of mine, Amira Sackett, and she led that first hip hop company that I was in. She said to me once a while back, she was like, you may be offered a job, you're not quite sure how to do it, and and it's probably going to be scary, but you just got to take it. And the first job that I got choreographing other people, which was for the Performing Arts High School, they do this thing called J-Term in Minnesota. It was like 25 dancers. And I was like, they asked me and I was like, yep, I can do it. And I was like, ah. But that advice has helped me push myself in choices that I've made moving my career forward, because I feel like if you're not willing to take a risk, if you're not willing to take that leap into the unknown, like you'll never be able to, like, living a creative artist life to me is there's very little that's like set. It's you're constantly like, I don't know how I'm going to pay. I actually don't know how I'm going to pay my bills next fall. I don't know. But because of what I've built over all these years, like an opportunity will present itself, or I can find a way to make an opportunity, or I can pick up the side job if I need to, you know? And so it's kind of like, to me, about having that end goal in sight. What is that end goal for you? And maybe you need to change it every couple of years, but just moving towards that goal for yourself and not deviating simply because people are like, get a real job, which is something that people had said to me. When are you going to get a real job? Like, this is a real job. And so I think the general population of people that go to work 9 to 5 perhaps don't understand the different realm of a reality that you can live in, where you can find this and you can find that and you can piece this together with that. And it's kind of just about, for me, going to that end goal. What is that and how do you feed it?
And understanding, I mean, it is another form of improvising.
Yeah, no, it's true.
I often will say, like, it's a choose your own adventure in this career that we have chosen. Yeah, there's something so much, but I think also what you talked about it, like, you're going to have a different relationship to risk.
Yes.
And that's what you're negotiating with yourself, and as well as inside the larger, field and society.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add on to that. Again, Rudy Goblin, when we were working on our solo, he was always like, surprise yourself, like make a new choice in the dance, that would excite you. And it's also the same thing with our career. Surprise yourself, do the collaboration that scares you a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you feel like, I gotta say it or I gotta do it, you should do that thing.
Yeah.
So I think surprising yourself, acting on, on that fear within reason, obviously, right?
Totally.
And making the leap is like super important, because you'll figure it out, because you're never going to be ready. Like,
Right.
if you're going to try to get ready all the time, you're just not going to do the thing. And again, if you feel like you need to say something or do something, you should do it. And which I did want to add to the 21st Dance Century practice question was that I love that you have it, because just because it's not classically trained or classical doesn't mean it doesn't have its own traditions.
Yeah.
And so the artists that you're bringing in here, there's a wealth of knowledge from those people, even though they weren't in a studio or trained.
Yeah.
Like, breaking has so much history. And so I love that you guys are given that opportunity as well, is that there's tradition in every art form. There's classical in every art form. That doesn't mean it's European. It's like, it can still be classical, African, diasporic. You know what I mean? Like, so I just wanted to add that.
Thank you for that reminder, too, to not only look at the new, but to understand its background and history and the tradition of its organizing. So fabulous. Please join me in thanking Joe and Lisa.
Inside the Dancers Studio live series is supported by NCCAkron, the University of Akron, the University of Akron Foundation, and the Mary Schiller Myers Lecture Series in the Arts. Our podcast program is produced by Jennifer Edwards. James Sleeman is our editor. Theme music by Flaco Torres, cover art by Micah Kraus, transcription by Arushi Singh. Special thanks to the team on the ground in Akron, Ohio. To learn more about NCCAkron, please visit us online at nccakron.org and follow us on Instagram or Facebook at NCCAkron. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we encourage you to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform by searching for Inside the Dancers Studio. Thanks so much for listening, and stay curious.